book lovers. Today on Books in the World, we welcome you, but we also have quite a treat for you because we're so used to all these superhero movies and all that kind of stuff, most of which are totally apocryphal tales. Today's guest, Holly Fitzgerald, author of Ruthless River, is actually, she doesn't have her Wonder Woman suit on, but her adventure was exactly what you'd expect of a superhero. And I'll tell you, I found it fascinating, Holly. Welcome, first of all.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me.
But the fact that it's true is even, if this had been fiction, it would have been captivating. The fact that it's true made it even more enthralling for me as a reader and for any of you who want to read it as well. You know, Holly, I've always thought that most memoirs are either deadly dull or lies. But this actually happened to you.
It did.
Can you give the audience a little bit, you know, just a minute or two, a summary of what Ruthless River was about?
Well, my husband and I, we were young, 26 and 27, and we were recently married, and we decided that we wanted to take a trip around the world. And actually, I had the idea. I said my family had done it a little bit, taken us on a couple of trips when we were young, and once we got married, I thought, why not have a delayed honeymoon before we get committed? We had no house, we were renting, we did have jobs that we loved. Fitz was a reporter and I was a social worker. But if we saved money, we gave ourselves a year, and Fitz agreed, we could backpack around the world. So we started, and the first few months were fabulous in South America. And then things went wrong when we were in a plane. It was a small plane, a DC-3, 13 people were on it, and we went down in the jungle. We were on our way to the Amazon River to connect with the Amazon. We were reaching a boat, the last boat before the flood season, on the Madre de Dios. And when that plane crash landed in the jungle, everything went wrong. And from there, we had to figure out how we were going to get out of there.
I'm telling you, to me, it's incredible. Now, Holly is adventurous. You can see that. She has that spirit of adventure. Personally, I can't imagine anyone even thinking of doing this kind of thing. Well, she didn't want to actually go through the survival part.
Right, that part,
but the fact of even doing it, and yet it's a story, I think, not only of survival, but of tenacity, of the devotion of you and your husband to each of you surviving.
Mm-hmm, you're right.
And the kind of things they encountered, I don't know, it's just beyond me. Truthfully now, and I believe there are a couple of people interested in making a movie out of it.
That's true.
And you can see why. We've already decided who's going to play Holly. It'll be some nymphette.
Right, whoever it is.
Scanty clothing.
I mean, if they're willing to starve a little bit,
well, they do that in Hollywood.
Their trade, right? Yes, if they're willing to do that.
See, this is a picture we wanted to show of Holly, innocent Holly, and her husband Fitz.
A little bit younger.
Look at that! Look at them. They're just kids. And well, they were actually you were 26 and 27. You should have known better.
We should have known better. But we did love those first few months. I will have to say, I can't speak well enough about traveling and learning from it. I do think.
But we were discussing, couldn't you have traveled and learned in Paris instead of going on the Amazon?
My husband, I think, would agree with you.
This is all wrong, Holly. This is all wrong, Holly.
Yeah, our first day there in Colombia when we arrived, and we were going, the cheapest way. So we went to this place, Barranquilla, Colombia, which is, you don't want to stay long. And I looked back at my husband, and he just looked like, oh no, we've got a year of this, because we had told everybody that we were going away for a year around the world, and we couldn't return now because they'd given us a party, a farewell party, and so long. So when I saw his face looking traumatized, because there were actually people at the grocery stores everywhere, soldiers with their guns and mud streets. It wasn't Paris. So I think Fitz was ready to go home, and I almost was too. But we quickly moved on in our itinerary to Cartagena, which is a beautiful place on the Caribbean, and people go there now quite a bit, I hear, from North
But they don't go on a raft.
No, you're right. They take a cruise.
See, here's why I call her Wonder Woman. Now, can you imagine this gently brought up social worker is suddenly cast, she and her husband, on your own,
That's true.
and they have to figure out how to survive. And I wonder. I don't think I could do it. I think I would have given up the ghost and decided
You
that
wouldn't
was
have wanted to eat some of those little things we got.
Well, I mean, I don't know. People
We
say
didn't
that.
either, of course.
They say that when you. I mean, what did that tell you about survival and the instinct to survive?
The
What did this tell
instinct is so strong that when you have to, you would too. I think that's the message, I suppose. If there is a message, is perseverance, that we don't always know what we have in us until we have to. Not that anybody, I would never wish that upon anybody, but there are lots of things that we have to persevere in to live. Just
Think of those Andes survivors. They ate human flesh.
Well,
you didn't go
no,
that
we
far.
didn't know
you didn't
that
do that.
at that
you didn't do
time.
that, right?
No, please.
Well, I mean, it's not in your book, but we don't know.
No.
Holly, you might. This could be one of those revelations.
That we found somebody somewhere. I don't know.
Juan.
Maybe grab Juan at that time, right?
We were discussing that. I write murder mysteries, so I have a cynical point of
she
view. I
does
think
see
everyone's.
things. I was a little innocent back then.
I
always
wondered-
had the positive look, and she's
I
teaching
wonder
me
if the
something
I
new.
wondered if people kind of set them up, knowing that these two young people had no clue, and here you are. Tell them about building that raft. I'll show the picture.
Oh, all right.
Now, would you go down the Amazon on this thing?
A nice man that we met, very debonair, named Juan, so that's who she's talking about. And he had salt and pepper hair. He just looked so debonair.
Think Ricardo Montalban on Fantasy Island.
Right. And he did have a white suit,
Same.
and he overheard us grumbling in the jungle when we said, what are we going to do in this little town, Puerto Maldonado? How are we going to get out of here? We missed our boat, and we just were devastated. And then he overheard us. It was a little tiny cafe with 4 tables and a mud floor. And he said, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear you. Perhaps I could help you." And he spoke beautiful English. Now, this is in Peru, where everybody speaks Spanish, and of course we're not in a main city, we're in the jungle, so we didn't expect anybody to speak
Did you speak Spanish, you and your husband?
Well, we spoke
Enough.
to get by, but he had beautiful English, and he said, "May I help you?" And we said, "Oh, sure, sit down." And he told
Lambs
us,
to the slaughter,
Yes,
lambs to
I
the
guess
slaughter.
so. We needed her there.
Yeah.
And I mean, Fitz was skeptical because he was more like you.
He's a lawyer.
Even though he was young, yes. Even pre-law, but he was a reporter, so he had that background, and he was skeptical, but Juan even kind of talked him into being interested in taking a raft. That's what Juan said, this is what we do down here in the jungle. We take rafts, and you could get a raft along the river and get yourselves to the destination where you can pick up another boat. We were trying to get 500 miles from Puerto Maldonado to Riberalta. So that was going to be a long way, but he said, you just go, there's nothing to it. You float along like Mark Twain. And I guess, well, I bought
Mark
into
Twain
it.
was
I
around
bought
the
into it
Mississippi,
first.
though, right?
I know. But do you know when Fitz went to get the license, which we did have a license, to take our raft, even though we knew nothing about rafts, they stamped many times this license, which we have to this day in the scrapbook, and the harbor master said, there's nothing to it, and he had a big photograph of Mark Twain up in his office, as well as a brand new ham radio. And he told Fitz, I will radio to the next place, River Alta, and make sure you make it within 10 days. And so we had more faith. Fitz said, he came back with the license. He said, I believe, this is a good omen because he's got Mark Twain out there. And,
how can you go wrong?
How can you go wrong,
Right.
right? So, and he was
And
going
you
to ham
believed in
radio.
bureaucracy, because this guy had stamped papers,
He had those
right?
stamps,
Yeah,
boy.
bureaucrats will
Yeah,
do it to you every time.
You're right, you're right.
Now, at what point did you and your husband wonder if you were going to die?
Well, let's see. The first day there was a huge storm that threw us off. We were doing great for 4.5 days. It was going to take us 5 days because we were going night and day, which the harbor master had told us. So the first day when we were thrown off by a big storm, that's when we got really scared because there was no land around. We were trapped in some kind of a swampy area. We'd been told by Juan, you always, if there's anything that takes you off, a small river that goes off, a detour, it will return back to the main river. But
Juan again.
But this didn't happen. So we began getting scared that very first day when we realized it was not a detour. We were trapped. And I don't think we thought we were going to die that day. Maybe Fitz did. He had been in jungles before in Vietnam. But I had more hope and more innocence, I guess, and I was just positive we'd make it. But after that, every day we were scared all the time.
How much food did you have with you?
Well, that's a good point because we had enough food, but a lot of it was knocked overboard when the storm came. So we only had a couple of things left. So we had some pea soup, powder form, just a little packet, and then we had some carnation, one can of carnation milk. Of course, once you open that, that'll spoil if you don't drink that right away. And then we had some sugar and 1 can of tuna fish. So that was it that would make maybe a meal for a big guy. Fitz was 6'1", and we had to just have a little bit at a time, we told ourselves, just to keep us going.
Now, at the point that you ran out of food and water, what did you guys do?
Well, we were trying to swim out of there.
Can you imagine this now? These two are swimming in the Amazon.
Yeah.
We've all seen National Geographic.
Yeah.
We know what's in that Amazon, and those two are swimming.
Right, we because of that survival instinct, right? Even though we knew there were anacondas, which I don't know if that shows up very well. There is an anaconda on the bottom here, but it's in the murky water. So
is that the same as a crocodile?
What it looked like. An anaconda is a big, huge, long snake that would wrap around you, and they will squeeze you to death.
Oh, good.
And
Good
many
to know.
of them
Good to know
are,
next time I'm in the Amazon.
so many feet long, and they swim along. So we knew they were there, even though the water was murky. Piranha, of course, and those caiman, they call them, which are a kind of an alligator that are down there. So, and all kinds of other things that we couldn't always see, but we knew were in there, but yet we couldn't walk. There was no land, so we had to swim.
And so you survived. We won't go into we'll let the readers find out the details of that, but you did tell me that these alligator, crocodile things, they are like logs.
They look just like logs, that's right. I mean, that's their camouflage. So everywhere you're looking, we were in a swamp, so there were logs and the caiman, whatever. We couldn't distinguish them, really.
And you didn't want to.
No, we did. We tried to focus on trying to survive every day, trying to think of something to do every day that would help us until maybe help came.
Are you going to tell them about the baby birds?
Do you want me to?
Tell about the baby birds.
Well, it was one of the things we were able to find as we were searching every day. Once we really were desperate for food, and that was probably one of our hardest parts, was when we found that nest of baby birds in terms of what we had to do. Because baby birds at home, of course, we would be feeding if we found them.
You know what we were discussing too, and I thought this was a fascinating aspect of your book. We as humans are used to being the alpha predators and blah, blah, blah. They were thrust into a situation where they became prey. And what a contrast.
You're so right. We're not used to that at all. Or certainly we never had been. Now maybe people who, frontiersmen or nature lovers, I mean, we like nature, but we didn't know what we were doing down there. I mean, we'd hiked in the Adirondacks or somewhere, but we did not have a clue what would be good to eat or what wouldn't, what was poisonous. We didn't have any survival skills at all, except Fitz and I had both been Boy Scout and Girl Scout, but I can't say.
Well, so did I, but I don't remember that in the badges,
No, that's right. The
surviving
badges.
in the Amazon
Right,
with that badge.
right, that badge.
Yeah, that badge.
We missed
we
that
didn't
badge.
do that one, yeah.
Right.
I had asked, I sort of tiptoed around this question before we got on here, because I wanted to know if Fitz, if her current husband was still Fitz. And the reason I asked was, a lot of times when people go through these traumatic events, they don't end up staying with that same person. Remember the people who stayed in the plane together, right? They flew around the world or whatever. They got divorced as soon as they got a bunch of them like that.
Out, right.
And so I was curious if that had forged a closer relationship, or if that, obviously it didn't rend you apart. So that's good.
Right. I know. I do think it was a bond. I haven't been in war, fortunately, but I suppose that's the closest I've been with such a tense time of trying to survive, and I guess I would think of it as, a close buddy in your, if you were at war, that you protect each other, you watch out for each other, you feel very close. And then, of course, we were romantically, a young couple, too. So
I don't think there was much romance going on, though, while you were trying to get out of there, right?
Well, before the on the raft, before we ended up, we had some wonderful days before the storm came, and we almost did make it to our destination. But you're right, everything stopped. We didn't even take photographs or anything once we realized we were trapped. We were in the mode of survival.
Would you like to read a portion of your?
Oh, shall I read just a
she's got a few,
or something?
Read something that would give us the flavor of it, because it's hard for people to visualize this.
Let's see. I have something
when the movie
about
comes
the
out,
bees. Now you've read
I like
it. So
the
you
bees
think that
thing.
was a good idea? All right. It's just I've just got a couple of paragraphs. Let's see. I opened the mosquito net and tent flap, seeking the cooler air of morning. "Watch out," I yelled, trying to close them again as hundreds of bees flew inside. Within seconds, they were in my hair, on my face and neck, descending on every part of my naked body. Flapping my hands, I tried to brush them away, but they stung me every time I moved. "Fitz," I screamed as I reached to tighten the flap where others were pouring in. He was flailing too. "Damn these things." "Stop moving," I said. With nowhere to run, I carefully lay down beside Fitz. My chest was heaving as the blanket of insects moved in different directions over me. As long as I remained dead still, the bees seemed to calm down. Is that enough?
That's enough.
Okay.
See, bees creep me out anyhow, because they seem to always attack, and yet you could have died from all those bee stings right there.
Well, fortunately, yes. I mean, everything was always a big question mark of would we make it, or if we could cut ourselves as we were trying to swim, or on a log, or we could be eaten by piranha. There were so many things, and even bee stings,
the anaconda.
of course, and the anaconda, and there were vampire bats, and there were jaguar sounds. In the night, there were lots of nocturnal animal sounds, so we were frightened all the time. But the bee stings, it was one of those things you don't know, are you going to be allergic? If not today, tomorrow, because they were so many, they just covered us completely.
Oh my God. And so how'd you get them off?
Well, should I leave some of it to?
Yeah, leave that to their
It
imagination.
was actually not easy, right? We were always fighting nature, and nature will win, obviously, if it really wants to. Well, we were going to try anyway. No
The
matter
odds
what.
were, the odds were, I mean, that's what's so astounding about this story, that she didn't have to resort to fiction. Most of us who write fiction, you know, we have to dream up these things. All you had to do was recount what happened.
What happened between nature and us, and who was going to win.
You know, I also wondered, it took you a while to write this.
Yes, quite
And
a
so
while.
there was a long period of time in between, and would you tell our audience why you waited?
Well, I wasn't really thinking of writing it. I thought my husband, if anybody was going to write it, he would. He had been a reporter. He was a writer. I think what happened was he didn't want to write it. He went on working as a reporter and a lawyer, and I was a social worker. We went on with our lives, and eventually a couple people said they would like to write it, and then I started to think, and actually I had breast cancer, and while I was going through chemo, I started to think of maybe writing it, putting it together. Our kids had said, "Why don't you write it?" And I had time to kind of process, but it still took me a long time. That was a few years ago. But before that, you know, we were busy with our lives, and then I took a couple of memoir classes, and because I didn't know where do you start? Even though it was a true story, it was still, whoa, which part should come first? And I went through a lot of different ways.
Do you ever have nightmares about it?
I'm fortunate that I don't.
You don't? So no post-traumatic stress?
Well, right afterwards, of course, that was pretty traumatic for the first few months. But but it always stays with you for, in a way, you just see life a little bit differently. I hope I appreciate life so much, and I guess, again, finding out that you can persevere, you can hopefully beat the odds if you keep trying, that kind of thing that I learned, the positives.
Well, you know, now I will give this little insight about the book. They never see Juan again. And I believe this Juan is a bad actor. I think he set these kids up. He didn't look like Mr.
She
Rourke
is a
for
mystery.
nothing. Hey, who wears a white suit in the jungle unless he is up
true.
to no
It's
good?
not too many. Not too. I know.
You know,
I thought he was.
Of course, he was charming and all that kind of stuff.
He was charming and he was helpful.
Bad guys usually are. Don't you know that? They're usually charming. You know, this is, in all seriousness,
Does
though,
sound almost
Yeah.
bizarre.
And that you were quite credulous, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I would just recommend to anyone who wants to read something that is true, but is also like an adventure tale. It is an adventure tale.
It is an adventure.
And it makes you question and put yourself in the position of, first of all, what would I do in that situation? I wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Okay? I'll tell you that right now. But you know,
Smart lady.
But a plane could happen anywhere, and how do you survive?
That's true.
And how, you know.
Even, that was kind of the part that threw us off of our itinerary. Before that, we met all these wonderful people on our trip before that would invite us to their homes, and that's why I know piranha are there, because in another one of the tributaries we did eat them for dinner, because the people who had invited us, they made a meal out of them. So we were very fortunate. It was really the plane crash plane crash landing. It didn't.
Did you ever
completely
consider
crash.
just staying where the plane crashed and waiting for someone to come save you? I mean, going with the others and.
Well, what happened? Was in a penal colony, so it wasn't really. It wasn't really the place that we wanted to stay.
There is that.
And then they did get us out on another plane And we were I think we were all afraid of going out that time, but we did make it to the town where we did take the raft.
Well, one thing we resolved early on was you didn't find any cannibals. Although we know there are some.
I have to say, we were fortunate. No, thank heavens for that.
Right. I have to say that, in interviewing people, you always wonder what in the world could ever happen like that. And this book, Ruthless River, I recommend it. Memoirs I think are snooze time, but not this one,
because it's interesting.
Because they're like psychotherapy. Someone wants to go through all the, but yours is just exhilarating, and it also makes me happy every day that I go into my nice house with central air, central heating, all cable TV, and all that kind of stuff. So.
Right, it makes you appreciative. I suppose even reading something like this, I know somebody said that they'd put it down and they'd go to their refrigerator and get something to eat. They knew that while they were reading that part when we were starving, they could go and get some food from the refrigerator. So it makes you feel appreciative, I think.
So we have met Wonder Woman.
Oh,
and
well,
she's
I don't
here.
know about that, but it's great to be here.
I want to thank you, Holly. Her husband didn't come on, but he's somewhere around here.
He's
We would have liked him
somewhere.
here too.
I know.
But I really thank you for being part of our program today.
You're so great. Thank you.
This is a great tale. Watch for the movie. When some nymphette plays Holly, and we'll find someone good to play your hubby
Yes,
too.
I don't know who, but evidently, we've got a contract, but it may take who knows how long.
And it's available. The book is available on Amazon, which for ebook or regular book.
Right.
And look for it in your stores. It's a great read.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Holly.
This has been delightful.